You're watching MPTV. On today's panel, we're discussing rental affordability, or more specifically, the National Rental Affordability Scheme. Joining me from Empower Wealth, Ben Kingsley, from the REIV, Robert LaRocca, and from the NRAS Superstore, Elizabeth Jackson. Now, Robert, we'll let you tee off. Can you explain to us the National Rental Affordability Scheme?
The genesis of it, of course, was during the GFC. It was one of a number of programs that the federal government put into place to try and stimulate the economy. It was seen as a way of getting some money into the housing sector to get the builders building homes and to have them for a good social purpose, because the problem we've had, I know particularly in Victoria and maybe in other states as well, is there is a critical shortage of affordable housing. And so the notion was basically the government will give you money to help with your development if you rent out a portion of the properties for below market rent. You know, at the very genesis, that's what the idea is. At the time when they introduced it during the GFC, it also came along with very good planning controls. The state government went to great lengths to try and increase the speed of their planning, to try and increase the delivery on the market, because the whole idea from their perspective was get people working.
And to basically find them somewhere to live. So, Elizabeth, at the NRAS Superstore, your job is obviously putting people into these places?
Well, effectively, we do two things. NRAS itself is, and as you know, is a complicated entity to explain to an investor. We specialise in explaining our NRAS model, and then we enter into a discussion with the client about what kind of property they want to purchase from us. So there's two things involved here. So from what Robert said, they offer their property at below rental level, 20% below market rent, and that's determined by independent valuers.
And what do they get in return from the government?
Well, they get a cash incentive of $10,000 this year, and that increases yearly over a period of 10 years. Also, if the circumstances change for the investor, they can give the NRAS licence back to whoever's doing the compliance for the investor.
And so who gets the benefit of the rental affordability?
It's really smart. It's about providing housing for key workers. So imagine the people that keep the lights on when we're asleep. We're talking about ambulance drivers, the people that work within our hospitals and our communities. It's about providing homes for them in key growth areas that have been designated by the state and federal government. You'll know that investors look for the new area that's going to pop. So the state and federal government have really indicated that to us by saying we need key workers in these areas because we know the employment hubs that we are building in these areas. It's about attracting key workers into these key growth areas and providing them housing and having them settle for long periods of time.
The fact that the rent obviously is, I guess, virtually subsidised. What's your take on it, Ben, from an investment advisory point of view?
Look, taking a holistic view on investing in general, the fundamentals need to still stack up. So I've always said to our clients, and as we advise people, that I wouldn't be making any decision based on a tax incentive. History of investing is littered with tax incentive schemes such as trees and ostriches and all of these other things which have failed investment outcomes. When we actually look at property, we've got to say to ourselves, what are the key drivers? What are the returns we're looking for? Capital growth has got to be important, and as well as the rental yield. Now, if we get a tax incentive on top of that, then that's something we've got to consider. But I see that as a tertiary outcome. The fundamentals of, is this property going to grow in value after the 10-year incentive? Are we going to see this as being a fundamental asset that we want to hold for the longer term?
And so, Elizabeth, is that obviously these are questions people have when they come in, especially the shrewd investors who've done their homework?
Oh, absolutely. But it comes back to that question, employment hubs and key growth areas. We look at Dandenong, the 2020 and the 2030 plan, and I always use this as an example. Dandenong is unrecognisable. We've had a lot of NRAS allocations go into Dandenong. Ballarat, there are huge employment hubs and money going in from the state and federal government. So that really addresses that. And I have to agree with you, it's got to be a good investment proposition initially. But once you have a look at the numbers and how they stack up, and look, you're right on the tax incentive, but our particular model gives the clients back cash. So you can take that cash, and a lot of my clients are buying small, little, wee NRAS properties and taking the cash incentive and putting it into their main liability, and you'll know this, it's your home mortgage. So there's lots of different ways to structure it.
And what is an NRAS property? Does it have to be a new property? Can you have old properties classified NRAS?
Has to be brand new. It has to be brand new.
There's the idea about getting people working. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. It's about driving that main, and you said it earlier, the construction industry. Has to be brand new, has to be close to transportation, growth hubs, shops, schools, amenities. So the key worker isn't inconvenienced at all by living in the house.
So you're still getting your depreciation on your,
Absolutely.
on your new
Absolutely.
build?
Yep. Tax depreciation.
A good example of the locational aspect of the key worker is there's a building in Docklands that was specifically built for that purpose, to say, well, we need to have the policemen and those sorts of people and nurses in Docklands, because otherwise it's not going to become a functioning community. So, it's really a program with good social purpose in mind. One of the issues has been I think the latest target was about 40,000 to have fully delivered, and they've only been about 10,000 delivered so far. So the difficulty has been actually getting them onto the ground and built. So that's sort of holding back what is a very good idea.
And originally the scheme was designed for major investments. So we were talking about, property trusts and then investing through financial planners through that scheme. What we've actually seen is the development of, direct investment through consortiums. So the consortiums are setting up these NRAS accredited projects, and then we're seeing direct investors go into those. But we've got to understand that they still might be a joint venture, so there might be some slight changes to the contract with some of the NRAS properties, meaning that originally lenders were a little bit, what's this, what's going on, and a little bit hesitant in terms of providing lending for those. So the whole flow-on effect of direct investment was struggling. We're now seeing some lenders who are reviewing that, and we're certainly seeing the mortgage insurers also taking on a little bit more of the responsibility and saying, these are the approved projects that we're looking at. So when you're actually looking at an NRAS property as an option, you need to also make sure that you can get the finance. There's considerations and concerns for some around refinancing in terms of releasing equity if there's been growth in those. Some of the valuers are also struggling with the concept of, is it an open market type of transaction? So it's still quite new. 2008 was when it was set up, and we're starting to see a little bit of that sort of change coming through. Initially, the contracts were very convoluted, they were very restrictive. Who were getting into them, first off, didn't realise that they were basically chained to the agreements. That's all fallen by the wayside now. We're starting to see more of those agreements. We're starting to see new direct investment happening in this particular space.
So your rent is at a 20% discount. That's obviously a benefit. Can you still negative gear? Do you get the negative gearing benefits?
Yeah, so you get all your negative gearing, and then you cash flow positive. It's extraordinary. And the thing is, when it first came out in 2008, people got it confused with social housing, and the water was really muddied. And there were people out there trying to sell NRAS without really understanding the psychology or the background behind it. I've been working with one of the consortiums here in Melbourne for a very long time. Their model was first agreed to by Westpac Trust and by the main lenders. We've had no problems in delivering and distributing through our particular program throughout Melbourne and Victoria. It's extraordinary, and we're starting to see investors wanting it. That's the other thing about it. Those days of 2008 when people weren't really satisfied with it, they're gone. People want it now.
Thanks very much for that. Thanks for joining us. And if you'd like to know more about the National Rental Affordability Scheme, go to our website, mptv.com.au, and follow the links. Next week, we take a look at South Bank. Our panel discusses heritage listings and financial planning strategies.
This show is brought to you by the Real Estate Institute of Victoria and realestateview.com.au.